I woke up from emergency spinal surgery to discover my husband had emptied our accounts and disappeared with over $500,000. But he made one devastating mistake. He forgot to check who legally owned the construction empire he'd built, his entire identity around. The anesthesia fog was lifting, and with it came a clarity I wish I could have avoided. The pain radiating through my back was excruciating where they'd inserted titanium rods to stabilize my shattered vertebrae, but that agony paled in comparison to what I was about to discover. I'm Samantha Reynolds, and for 16 years, I thought I had a solid marriage to Eric. It's remarkable how a sudden medical emergency can reveal far more than just the condition of your spine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The first sign something was terribly wrong came when my sister Jennifer, not Eric, was sitting beside my hospital bed when I finally regained consciousness. The spinal fracture had happened without warning. One moment I was carrying groceries up our front steps. The next I was collapsed in agony, unable to feel my legs. The doctors later explained that an undiagnosed condition had weakened my vertebrae over time, making them susceptible to sudden fracture. "Where's Eric?" I asked. My throat parched and voice raspy from the breathing tube they'd removed after surgery. Jennifer's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something between anger and pity that made my heart drop, despite the heavy painkillers flowing through my system. "He had to handle some urgent business matters," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "He said he'd be back this evening." There was something in her tone that immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. Jennifer and I had been finishing each other's sentences since childhood. I could read her micro-expressions better than anyone. "Jen, what aren't you telling me?" I managed to whisper. She adjusted my blanket unnecessarily, buying herself time. "Let's focus on how you're feeling right now. The doctor said the surgery went perfectly. With physical therapy, you should regain full mobility." But I couldn't focus on my medical prognosis. A cold dread was spreading through me, more numbing than any anesthetic. "My phone," I said, reaching out my hand weakly. "I need my phone." Jennifer hesitated, then reluctantly retrieved my smartphone from her purse. "Sam, maybe you should rest a bit more before—" "Please, Jen." The moment she placed it in my hands, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. 47 missed calls, dozens of text messages and email notifications. Not from Eric, but from our bank, our investment advisor, our mortgage company, and several numbers I didn't recognize. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the barrage of alerts. Account closure confirmations, large transfer notifications, mortgage payment failures, and most bizarrely, messages from our realtor about the unexpected urgency of the house listing and potential buyers ready for immediate viewings. "Jennifer," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "how long have I been here?" 3 days. The pain management made you drift in and out after surgery. 3 days, 72 hours. That's all it had taken for Eric to systematically dismantle our entire life together. The hospital room door opened, and I hoped, it might be Eric with some rational explanation for this digital chaos. Instead, a woman in a crisp business suit entered, her expression professionally sympathetic. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Vanessa Martinez from First National Bank's Fraud Investigation Unit. I apologize for disturbing you during your recovery, but there have been concerning activities with your accounts that couldn't wait." Jennifer moved protectively closer to my bed. "This is hardly the time." "It's okay, Jen," I interrupted, my legal instincts kicking in despite the medication. I'd spent 12 years as a corporate attorney before stepping back to support Eric's construction business and raise our daughter Lily. "I need to know what's happening." Vanessa pulled up a chair and positioned her tablet where I could see it. 3 days ago, beginning approximately 30 minutes after you were admitted for emergency surgery, a series of transfers were initiated from your joint accounts. The total amount moved was $547,000, transferred through a sequence of accounts, before ultimately landing in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I stared at the screen, the figures swimming before my eyes. Our retirement savings, Lily's college fund, the emergency reserves we'd carefully built over 16 years of marriage, gone. There must be some mistake, I said automatically, even as my mind began connecting dots I didn't want to acknowledge. Eric would never... The transfers were authorized using valid credentials and security questions, Vanessa continued gently. Additionally, your home equity line of credit was maxed out for an additional $320,000 the following day. The authorization included your electronic signature. My electronic signature. I remembered Eric leaning over my hospital bed before surgery, holding up his phone. Just some insurance forms they need, Sam. Can you sign quickly? They're prepping the OR for you. I'd scribbled my finger across the screen without reading anything, distracted by pain and fear. He used my signature while I was about to go into emergency surgery? The betrayal was so profound, it momentarily overshadowed the financial devastation. Vanessa nodded grimly. I'm afraid there's more. Your joint credit cards have been maxed out with cash advances totaling approximately $42,000, and your home was listed for sale yesterday with instructions for an expedited closing. The room seemed to tilt despite me lying flat on my back. 16 years of marriage, a 13-year-old daughter who adored her father, a life I thought was solid and secure, all apparently worth abandoning for just under $1 million. Can any of this be stopped? Jennifer asked, her hand gripping mine tightly. We've flagged the transactions as potentially fraudulent, but given that Mr. Reynolds had legal access to these accounts and valid authorization methods, recovery may be challenging, Vanessa admitted. However, she hesitated, scrolling through another screen on her tablet. However, I prompted, our records indicate you're the majority owner of Reynolds Construction Holdings, LLC. Those business accounts appear untouched, with significant assets that Mr. Reynolds hasn't attempted to access. I closed my eyes as a memory surfaced through the medication haze. When Eric's construction business began expanding rapidly 7 years ago, I'd used my legal expertise to restructure it, to protect our personal assets from potential construction liability claims. I'd established the company with myself as 51% owner. Eric had dismissed it as lawyer paranoia and just paperwork that wouldn't affect his day-to-day control of the business. That's correct, I said, opening my eyes. I own controlling interest in the company. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vanessa looked relieved. Then there's a substantial silver lining here, Mrs. Reynolds. While your personal finances have been compromised, the business assets, which our records indicate are worth approximately $4.8 million, remain secure. Jennifer's eyes widened. Eric didn't touch the business accounts? He likely couldn't, I explained, my legal mind engaging despite the trauma and medication. The business accounts require dual authorization for large transfers, both the CEO, which is Eric, and the majority owner, which is me. It was a safeguard I insisted on. A very fortunate safeguard, Vanessa noted. Mrs. Reynolds, given the circumstances, would you like me to initiate emergency protocols for the business accounts? We can change authentication requirements immediately. Yes, I said without hesitation. Lock everything down. And I need to speak with Michael Chen in your business banking division. He helped set up our corporate structure. After Vanessa left, promising to have Michael call me directly, Jennifer looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. Sam, I don't know how you're thinking so clearly right now. I honestly didn't know either. My body felt broken, the surgical pain radiating through my spine despite the medication. Yet my mind was operating with a sharpness I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if some dormant part of my brain, the attorney who had once orchestrated complex corporate restructurings, and negotiated million-dollar deals, had suddenly reawakened. I'm operating on autopilot, I admitted. If I stop to really process what Eric has done, I might fall apart completely. Jennifer squeezed my hand. You won't fall apart. You've always been the strongest person I know, even when you were letting Eric take center stage. Her words struck a chord. Had I been letting Eric dominate our partnership? I'd always viewed our division of responsibilities, him running the construction business, me supporting from behind the scenes while raising Lily, as a mutual choice. But looking back, I could see how gradually, almost imperceptibly, I'd surrendered more and more control. My legal insights had been reframed as excessive caution. My financial questions dismissed as not understanding the construction industry. My career independence slowly transformed into supportive wifehood. My phone rang, interrupting these uncomfortable realizations. Michael Chen's name flashed on the screen. Samantha, he said warmly when I answered. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry you're going through this, especially while recovering from surgery. Thanks, Michael. I need your help securing the business assets immediately. Of course. I'm already working on it. Vanessa briefed me about the personal accounts, but your business structure should provide significant protection. For the next hour, Michael guided me through a series of emergency financial measures. We revoked Eric's access to all business accounts, changed authorization protocols for wire transfers, froze company credit lines, put project managers on alert that all financial decisions now required my direct approval. It's fortunate you insisted on those dual authorization safeguards, Michael commented. Without them, he might have drained the business accounts as well. I remember Eric arguing against them, I said, fragments of memory surfacing. He called it unnecessary red tape that would slow down business operations. Well, that unnecessary red tape just saved your company, Michael replied. Now, there's something else you should know. 3 major construction projects are in the final contract stages: the Westridge development, the Alpine Heights Resort expansion, and the downtown University Medical Center. Together, they represent about $82 million in potential revenue. My pulse quickened. Were the contracts finalized? No. From what I can see, they were scheduled for signing next week. If Eric had waited just a little longer before making his move, he could have signed those contracts, collected the initial deposits, and disappeared with even more money. I finished. Exactly. His timing may have been dictated by your unexpected surgery. He had to choose between waiting for those contract deposits or taking advantage of your incapacitation. The calculated coldness of it hit me anew. Eric had seen my medical emergency not as a crisis, but as an opportunity, a perfect moment, to execute his escape plan while I was literally unable to interfere. After finishing with Michael, I turned to Jennifer. I need my laptop, my business files from the home office, and I need to know exactly where Lily is right now. Lily's. Fine. She's at that 2-week soccer camp in Colorado Springs, remember? She has no idea about any of this. Jennifer hesitated. As for your files, Eric cleaned out the home office yesterday. The desktop computer, all the paper files, even the external hard drives. One of our neighbors saw him loading boxes into his Tahoe. I felt a momentary panic, then started to laugh. A slightly hysterical sound that alarmed Jennifer. What? She asked. He took all the physical records, every paper file, every local hard drive, I explained. But every important document is backed up to a secure cloud server that only I can access. It was a redundancy system I set up years ago that Eric always said was excessive. Jennifer smiled for the first time since I'd regained consciousness. So he stole the copies and left you with the originals? Basically, and he has no idea. The realization was strangely empowering. Despite everything Eric had taken, there were things he couldn't touch, resources he'd discounted or forgotten entirely. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly. "Samantha, this is Greg Turner from Turner & Associates. I've been retained by Eric regarding business matters. Please have your attorney contact me to facilitate transition of company control." "Who's Greg Turner?" Jennifer asked, reading over my shoulder. "I've never heard of him," I replied, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. "Eric's never mentioned him." "Sounds like he hired a lawyer before he even left town," Jennifer observed. "One you don't know, which means he's been planning this for a while." I forwarded the message to Caroline Morris, my former law partner and close friend. Within minutes, my phone rang. "First of all, how are you?" Caroline asked without preamble. "Physically or emotionally?" "Both. My spine is being held together with titanium, and my husband emptied our accounts while I was unconscious. But somehow I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." "That's the attorney in you," Caroline said. "Crisis has always sharpened your focus. Now, about this Greg Turner character, he's not someone I know, but I've already done some digging. He's a small-time lawyer from Boulder who specializes in what he calls business divorces. Basically helps partners split up companies, often in ethically questionable ways. And he thinks he can help Eric get control of the construction." "Company?" I asked incredulously. "Apparently. But here's what interests me. Why would Eric hire a lawyer specifically for this? If he's fled the country with your money, why bother trying to gain legal control of the business? Unless there's something about the business I don't know," I concluded, the implications sinking in. "Something valuable enough that he wants both our personal savings and control of the company." "Exactly. I think we need to look deeper into what Reynolds Construction has been up to recently. Those 3 pending contracts Michael mentioned might be just the beginning." By that evening, my hospital room had transformed into an impromptu command center. Jennifer had brought my backup tablet. Caroline had arrived with legal documents, and her best paralegal. My college roommate, Denise, now a forensic accountant, had joined remotely to comb through the financial records I could access from the cloud server. "Your husband wasn't particularly sophisticated about covering his tracks," Denise reported after her initial assessment. "The personal account transfers were direct. Cayman Islands, Belize, a few accounts in Panama. Classic tax havens, but nothing elaborate. He didn't think he needed to be careful," I realized. "He assumed I'd be too physically debilitated and emotionally devastated to mount any kind of response." Caroline nodded grimly. "Men like Eric consistently underestimate women, especially wives they've convinced to step away from their careers. In his mind, you transitioned from formidable attorney to supportive wife years ago." "And that was his mistake," Jennifer added with satisfaction. Indeed, Eric had made several critical errors. He'd forgotten that before I was his wife, I was a corporate attorney who specialized in business protection. He'd dismissed our company's legal structure as meaningless paperwork. He'd assumed my professional skills had atrophied during my years focusing on our family and his business. Most significantly, he'd underestimated the network of competent women I'd maintained relationships with, even as my own professional visibility diminished. Dr. Lambert entered during our strategy session, surprised to find her patients surrounded by legal pads and financial statements instead of flowers and get-well cards. "Mrs. Reynolds, while I applaud your mental resilience, I must insist you get adequate rest. Spinal fusion recovery requires significant physical and mental repose." "I understand, doctor," I replied, "but certain matters simply cannot wait. Can you tell me realistically when I might be discharged?" She frowned slightly. "With the extent of your surgical intervention, we'd normally keep you hospitalized for at least another week, followed by inpatient rehabilitation." "And if I arranged for private nursing and physical therapy?" "Medically inadvisable, but not impossible," she conceded reluctantly. "You'd need fully accessible living arrangements, 24-hour care initially, and absolutely no stress. The four of us exchanged glances. "The stress ship has sailed, Dr. Lambert," I said dryly, "but I can arrange the rest." After the doctor left, we continued piecing together Eric's scheme and my response. Caroline had prepared emergency legal motions to freeze any assets we could trace. Denise was documenting the timeline of suspicious financial movements. Jennifer was coordinating with a private nursing service and looking into wheelchair-accessible accommodations. As night fell and my friends departed with promises to return in the morning, I found myself alone with my thoughts for the first time since discovering Eric's betrayal. The pain medication was wearing off, both physical discomfort and emotional, reality sharpening into focus. 16 years of marriage. A beautiful, athletic 13-year-old daughter who hero-worshipped her father. A comfortable life in our Denver suburb with weekend hikes, summer vacations in Lake Tahoe, and the small rituals that had formed the fabric of our family existence. Had it all been a lie? Had Eric been planning his escape for years, just waiting for the right moment? Or had something changed recently? Some opportunity or threat that had triggered this extreme response? My phone chimed with a text from an international number. "Sam, by now you've seen the account changes. Had to make emergency moves because of potential litigation risk. Everything's fine. We'll explain when I'm back next week. Love you and hope. Your recovery is going well." The calculated casualness of it, the utter disregard for the devastation he'd caused, it crystallized something within me. This wasn't an impulsive act or temporary insanity. This was premeditated abandonment on a grand scale, executed with cold precision while I was at my most vulnerable. I forwarded the message to Caroline with a simple note. "Can we trace this?" Her response was immediate. "Already on it." Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by surgical pain and cascading realizations. Each time I drifted off, some new aspect of Eric's betrayal would surface in my consciousness, jolting me awake. By morning, I was exhausted, but more determined than ever. Caroline arrived early, grim satisfaction evident in her expression. "We've found something. Those 3 pending contracts, they're worth substantially more than the $2 million Michael mentioned. The Westridge development alone has a hidden second phase that would double its value." "How did you discover that?" "I had my investigators speak with the developer directly, posing as a potential investor. They were quite open about the full scope of the project, apparently assuming that as the wife of the contractor, you'd know all the details. The implications were staggering. So Eric hid the true value of these contracts even from our own financial records? It appears so. He created 2 sets of projections, the official ones that everyone at Reynolds Construction sees, and private ones that show the actual expected revenue. Which means he's been planning to underreport income, I concluded. Classic tax fraud. Exactly. And there's more. The Alpine Heights Resort project? It's owned by a holding company called Meridian Ventures. Guess who has a 30% stake in Meridian, carefully hidden behind 3 shell companies? Eric, I whispered. Eric, Caroline confirmed. He's been positioning the construction company to contract with businesses he secretly co-owns. It's a textbook self-dealing scenario, illegal in about 6 different ways. The pieces were falling into place now. Eric hadn't just been planning to steal our personal savings. He'd been orchestrating a complex scheme to extract maximum value from the construction company through fraudulent contracts, tax evasion, and self-dealing arrangements. That's why he wanted to maintain control of the company even after fleeing. With our savings, I realized, those contracts would have generated millions more in illicit profits. And why he hired Greg Turner, Caroline added. He needs someone to try to wrest control from you legally while he's safely out of the country. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The scope of Eric's betrayal was so vast, so comprehensive, that it had moved beyond personal heartbreak. into the realm of complex legal problems, territory where my professional expertise could guide me. "We need to document everything," I said. "Every fraudulent arrangement, every hidden ownership stake, every misleading contract. And we need to move quickly before he realizes we've discovered the full extent of his scheme." The next 48 hours passed in a carefully orchestrated counteroffensive. Despite my physical limitations and pain, I found myself fully immersed in what Caroline called full attorney mode. We assembled evidence, prepared legal motions, and systematically secured every aspect of the business I could control. Michael Chen arranged an emergency meeting with the bank's senior management to present the evidence of Eric's financial malfeasance, ensuring their full cooperation with our investigation. Denise constructed a detailed timeline of suspicious transactions going back nearly 18 months, revealing the methodical nature of Eric's planning. Caroline prepared injunctions to prevent any assets from being moved or concealed further. Most crucially, we reached out to the 3 major clients whose contracts were pending, informing them of leadership changes at Reynolds Construction, and requesting in-person meetings to discuss project details. 7 days after my surgery, I was discharged to a fully accessible apartment Caroline had arranged in her firm's executive housing block. With private nursing care and physical therapy scheduled 3 times daily, I established a new base of operations from a hospital bed installed in the living room, surrounded by legal documents, financial records, and the growing evidence of Eric's crimes. My physical pain remained significant, but it had become almost secondary to the intense focus I brought to unraveling Eric's scheme. Each new discovery, each layer of fraud and deception, fueled my determination to not only recover what was mine, but to ensure Eric faced the full consequences of his actions. The first client meeting was scheduled with Westridge Development, whose CEO, Robert Harmon, arrived at the apartment looking distinctly uncomfortable about conducting business. With someone in a hospital bed, "Mrs. Reynolds, I was so sorry to hear about your medical situation," he began awkwardly, "and about the changes at Reynolds Construction. Thank you, Mr. Harmon. I appreciate your flexibility in meeting me here. As you can see, my circumstances are unusual, but my commitment to the Westridge project remains absolute." He shifted uncomfortably. About that, Eric assured us that the project would proceed with him personally overseeing every aspect. With his departure, we're concerned about continuity. I understand completely. That's precisely why I wanted to meet in person, to assure you that Reynolds Construction's management team remains intact, our resources are secure, and our ability to deliver exceptional work is unchanged. That's reassuring, but... He hesitated. "But there were certain arrangements with Eric that you're wondering about," I finished for him. "Specific understandings that might not be documented in the official contract." His eyes widened slightly. "You know about those?" "Mr. Harmon, I know about everything," I said calmly, "including the second phase of development that doesn't appear in the official projections, and the ownership stake in Westridge that Eric holds through Pinnacle Investment Group." He paled visibly. "Mrs. Reynolds, those arrangements were made in good faith." "I'm sure they were," I interrupted gently. "And I have no intention of disrupting legitimate business relationships. However, I do need to ensure that all arrangements going forward are properly documented, fully transparent, and legally sound." Over the next hour, Harmon and I renegotiated the terms of the Westridge contract. The revised agreement included the previously hidden second phase, proper disclosure of all ownership interests, and a more advantageous payment schedule for Reynolds Construction. In exchange, I offered slightly more favorable pricing and priority scheduling. "I think this arrangement benefits us both," I concluded, as Harmon reviewed the modified terms. "Westridge gets a committed contractor with highly competitive rates, and Reynolds Construction gets a showcase project with proper documentation and cash flow." Harmon signed the revised contract, looking both relieved and impressed. Eric always said you were just his wife, but clearly you're much more than that. I always was, I replied simply. He just forgot. Similar meetings followed with Alpine Heights and the University Medical Center, each resulting in renegotiated contracts that eliminated the fraudulent elements while preserving the business relationships. By the end of the week, Reynolds Construction had secured $4 million in legitimate projects, far more than the $2 million that had appeared in the official records. On the personal front, the legal battle to recover the stolen funds continued. Caroline's team had successfully frozen accounts in Belize and Panama, though the Cayman Islands assets remained elusive. The FBI had opened an investigation into wire fraud and tax evasion based on the evidence we'd compiled. And most significantly, a federal judge had granted emergency orders preventing Eric from attempting to exert any control over Reynolds Construction. 10 days after my discharge from the hospital, as I was conducting a video conference with the construction company's management team, my phone rang with another international number. Samantha Reynolds, I answered professionally, signaling the team to continue without me as I muted my microphone. What the hell do you think you're doing? Eric's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Hello, Eric. I'm running my company, recovering from the spinal surgery I had while you were emptying our bank accounts and cooperating with federal investigators. How are you? Your company? He sputtered. I built Reynolds Construction from nothing. Those contracts were mine. Those clients trusted me. Those contracts were procured through fraud, I replied evenly. Those clients were being misled about ownership interests and project scope. And the company was legally mine all along. You just never bothered to read the boring legal mumbo-jumbo, as you called it. This isn't over, Sam. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with now. A man who abandoned his family, stole their savings, committed multiple federal crimes, and is now threatening his wife from whatever country doesn't have extradition treaties with the United States. I had to leave, he insisted, his voice shifting from anger to a strange, wounded indignation. The business was in trouble. I was protecting us from creditors. I was going to bring you and Lily down once things were settled. The lie was so brazen, so completely contradicted by the evidence we'd uncovered, that I almost admired its audacity. The business wasn't in trouble, Eric. In fact, it was on the verge of its most profitable year ever. Money you intended to divert through your shell companies and hidden ownership stakes. A long silence followed. When he spoke again, his voice had hardened. You always were too clever for your own good. That's why I encouraged you to step back from the legal work. You noticed too many details. Yet you missed the most important detail of all, I observed. The company structure that made me the majority owner. That was just paperwork, he snapped. Everyone knows it's my company. I made every decision, signed every contract, built every relationship. And now I've restructured those contracts, rebuilt those relationships, and made new decisions that will shape the company's future. A future you won't be part of. His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. This isn't over, Samantha. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I have a very clear idea now, I replied. The question is whether you understand what I'm capable of. Because the attorney you thought had disappeared when I became your wife. She's back, and she's very, very motivated. I ended the call and returned to my video conference, where the team was discussing implementation strategies for the Westridge project. Despite the physical pain that still radiated through my spine, despite the emotional wounds that still felt raw and exposed, I found myself fully engaged in the detailed planning discussion. Later that evening, as the private nurse helped me with my physical therapy exercises, I reflected on the strange duality of my situation. My body was broken, requiring assistance for the most basic functions. My marriage had imploded in the most devastating way possible. My financial security had been shattered. By any reasonable measure, I should have been overwhelmed, incapacitated by the convergence of physical and emotional traumas. Yet, paradoxically, I felt more intellectually alive, more professionally engaged than I had in years. The attorney who had slowly been subsumed by the roles of supportive wife and mother had reemerged with unexpected force and clarity. The skills I'd set aside, the analytical thinking, the strategic planning, the meticulous attention to detail, had not atrophied but merely lain dormant, waiting for the moment they would be needed again. And Eric, in his arrogance and greed, had provided exactly that moment. The next morning brought a development I'd been dreading, but knew was inevitable. My daughter Lily was scheduled to return from soccer camp, still completely unaware that her father had abandoned us both and dismantled our family's financial foundation. Jennifer had offered to pick her up and bring her to the accessible apartment, giving me time to prepare for the most difficult conversation of my life. How do you tell a 13-year-old girl that the father she adores has not only left, but has stolen their security and future in the process? I had rehearsed various approaches, trying to balance honesty with age-appropriate explanations. I had consulted with a child psychologist Caroline had recommended. I had even written out talking points, as if this were a particularly challenging client presentation, rather than a conversation that would forever alter my daughter's understanding of her family and her world. But when Jennifer's car pulled up outside, and I glimpsed Lily's familiar profile through the window, her sandy blonde hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail Eric always wore on construction sites, all my careful preparations evaporated. "Mom!" Lily's excited voice called as she entered, then stopped abruptly at the sight of me in the hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment. "Mom, what happened? Where are we? Where's Dad?" Lily stood frozen in the doorway, her soccer duffel still slung over her shoulder, eyes wide with confusion and growing alarm. I reached out my hand to her, pushing aside the legal papers surrounding me on the hospital bed. "Come here, sweetheart." She approached cautiously, taking in the unfamiliar apartment, the medical equipment, the back brace visible beneath my loose shirt. "You're really hurt," she whispered. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "I didn't want to ruin your camp experience," I said, gently pulling her down to sit beside me. "The doctors said you couldn't do anything anyway, so we decided to wait until you got back. But what happened? And where's Dad?" She looked around as if expecting Eric to materialize from another room. Jennifer quietly slipped away to the kitchen, giving us privacy for the conversation I'd been dreading since waking up in the hospital. "I fractured my spine," I explained, starting with the simplest truth. I was carrying groceries up the front steps, and suddenly something gave way. The doctors discovered I have a condition that had weakened my vertebrae over time. They had to put in metal rods to stabilize everything. "Will you be okay?" Lily's voice trembled slightly. "Yes. The surgery went well, and with physical therapy, I should recover most of my mobility. It's going to take time, though." She nodded, processing this information, then asked again, "Where's Dad? Is he at work? Does he know you're here instead of at home?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what came next. "Lily, there's something difficult I need to tell you about your father. While I was in surgery." My voice caught unexpectedly. Despite all my preparation, despite the anger and determination that had propelled me through the past 2 weeks, this moment, telling my daughter her father had abandoned us, felt nearly impossible. "Mom, you're scaring me," Lily said, her eyes filling with tears. "Your father has left," I said finally, forcing the words out. "He emptied our bank accounts and left the country while I was unconscious in the hospital." Lily's face went blank, with incomprehension. "What? That's not... He wouldn't do that!" "There must be some mistake." "I wish it were a mistake, sweetheart, but he texted me from overseas. He took our savings, your college fund, our retirement accounts, everything, and disappeared. But why? Lily's voice rose with disbelief. That doesn't make any sense. Dad wouldn't just leave us. I don't understand it fully myself, I admitted. He's been planning this for some time, hiding things from both of us. When my emergency surgery happened, he saw an opportunity to execute his plan while I couldn't stop him. Lily jumped, up from the bed, her face contorting with a mixture of disbelief and fury. No, you're lying! Dad wouldn't do that! He loves us. Something else happened. Someone forced him or threatened him or something. Lily, I've seen the bank records. I've read his messages. He did this deliberately and he's not planning to come back. Have you called him? Maybe he can explain. He's contacted me, I said carefully. His explanations don't match the evidence. He's hiding in a country without extradition treaties because what he did was illegal. So call the police. Make them find him. Tears were streaming down Lily's face now. The FBI is already involved, sweetheart. But finding him isn't going to bring back the money or make him the father you thought you knew. Stop it, Lily shouted, backing away from the bed. Just stop it. I don't believe you. Dad would never do this to us. Jennifer reappeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Everything okay in here? No, Lily snapped. Mom's saying crazy things about Dad. I signaled Jennifer with my eyes, a silent request for support. She moved closer to Lily, putting a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your mom's telling you the truth, honey, she said softly. I know it's incredibly hard to hear, but your dad really did take the money and leave while your mom was in surgery. You're both lying! Lily wrenched away from Jennifer's touch. I want to call Dad. I want to hear it from him. I nodded to Jennifer, who reluctantly handed Lily her phone. His number won't work anymore, I warned. But you can try. With shaking hands, Lily pulled up her contacts and tapped on Dad. The call went straight to a disconnection message. She tried again with the same result, then frantically began texting. Dad, it's Lily. Mom's saying crazy things. Please call me. I need to talk to you. We all watched as the message remained undelivered, the error notification eventually appearing. He changed his number, I explained gently. His old accounts have been closed. This can't be happening, Lily whispered, sinking onto a nearby chair. Why would he do this? Why would he leave me? The question broke my heart more thoroughly than anything Eric had done to me. Because while I could intellectually understand his betrayal of me, the greed, the opportunity, the calculated risk, there was no explanation I could offer my daughter for why a father would abandon his child. I don't know, sweetheart. I admitted. I don't think it has anything to do with you or how much he loved you. I think he made selfish choices that he didn't fully consider the consequences of. Did he even say goodbye? Did he leave me a message or a letter or anything? I shook my head, hating the additional pain this truth would cause but unwilling to manufacture comforting lies. No, he didn't. So I just came home from camp to find out my dad's gone forever, and my mom's crippled and we have no money, and nothing's ever going to be normal again? Her voice rose hysterically. Not quite, I said, trying to find a balance between honesty and reassurance. I'm injured but healing. We still have a home, or we will have. Once we figure out where, we're going to live permanently. And while he took our personal savings, he couldn't touch the construction company. We still have financial resources. I don't care about the stupid company, Lily shouted. I care that my dad is gone. Jennifer moved closer again. Lily, why don't we take a break? You must be exhausted from camp and travel, and this is a lot to process. I've set up the guest room for you with your things from home. Maybe you'd like to rest for a while? Lily looked at me, her expression a devastating mixture of confusion, betrayal, and desperate hope that this might somehow all be reversed. Is this really real? He's really gone? Yes, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. She turned away, shoulders slumped in defeat. "I want to be alone." Jennifer led her toward the guest room, glancing back at me with a supportive nod. When they'd gone, I let my own tears flow freely for the first time since discovering Eric's betrayal. Not for myself or the loss of my marriage. That grief seemed almost secondary now. But for my daughter, whose world had just been shattered in a way that no legal victory or financial recovery could ever fully repair. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the apartment, followed by muffled sobbing from the guest room. Jennifer returned, sitting beside me on the bed. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "I've been preparing for that conversation for 2 weeks, and it was still 1,000 times worse than I imagined," I admitted. "How do you explain to a child that her father chose money over her?" "You can't. There's no explanation that would make sense to her. What if she never recovers from this? What if the trauma of his abandonment damages her permanently?" Jennifer shook her head. "Don't go there, Sam. Kids are resilient, especially kids with strong support systems. And Lily has you and me and a whole network of people who love her. She'll grieve, she'll rage, she'll probably have some therapy bills in her future, but she'll come through this." "I just never wanted her to experience this kind of pain," I said softly. "I would have done anything to protect her from it. I know. But you can't protect her from the truth forever. And you're giving her something Eric never did. Honest answers. Even when they're difficult." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Caroline's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," I told Jennifer. "Can you check on Lily?" "In a bit?" Jennifer nodded and moved to the kitchen while I answered the call. "Caroline, we just told Lily about Eric. It went about as well as you'd expect." "I'm sorry, Sam. How are you holding up? Physically or emotionally? Because both answers are barely. I hate to add to your stress, but we've got a situation with the Westridge contract. Eric apparently reached out to Robert Harmon directly from overseas. He's claiming you're mentally unstable due to medication and have no authority to restructure the contracts." I closed my eyes, momentarily overwhelmed by this new complication. "What did Harmon say?" "He's confused and concerned. The revised contract is significantly more favorable to Reynolds Construction than what Eric had negotiated. Harmon's wondering if he's being played. Can you set up an emergency video call with him? I need to address this directly." "Already scheduled for 4 p.m. But Sam, are you sure you're up for this? You've just had an incredibly difficult conversation with Lily. You're still recovering from major surgery. I don't have the luxury of taking time off from this fight," I said firmly. "Eric is clearly escalating his efforts to undermine me. If he manages to poison these client relationships, the company's future is at risk. All right, I'll handle the technical setup. Just be ready at 4. After hanging up, I turned my attention back to the sounds coming from the guest room. The sobbing had subsided, replaced by the muffled bass of music played at high volume, Lily's typical response to emotional distress. Jennifer returned with a cup of tea. She's locked the door, but at least she's playing music instead of sitting in silence. That's actually a good sign with teenagers. "Caroline just called," I told her. "Eric's reached out to our clients, claiming I'm mentally unstable and acting without authority. Can he do that? Legally? Not effectively, but he can certainly create confusion and doubt. I have to address it immediately before he poisons these relationships." Jennifer studied me with concern. "Sam, you're pushing yourself too hard. The doctor said stress could complicate your recovery. What choice do I have? If I don't fight back immediately, Eric could seriously damage the company's reputation and client base. That company is our future now, mine and Lily's. I can't afford to let it be destroyed." By 4 p.m., I had composed myself as best I could, applied minimal makeup to look professional on video, and positioned myself at the makeshift desk we'd set up beside the hospital bed. Caroline had arranged for her firm's sophisticated video conferencing system to be used, ensuring optimal audio and visual quality. Robert Harmon's face appeared on the screen, his expression cautious. "Mrs. Reynolds, thank you for making time on such short notice." "Mr. Harmon, I understand my husband has contacted you with some concerning claims." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "He reached out early this morning, suggesting that the contract revisions you proposed were unauthorized and potentially harmful to Reynolds Construction. He indicated that you're heavily medicated following surgery and not in a position to make binding business decisions." I smiled thinly. "Mr. Harmon, I appreciate your willingness to discuss this directly with me rather than simply taking my husband's word. As you can see, I am indeed recovering from surgery, but I am fully lucid and completely aware of my business decisions. Mrs. Reynolds, please understand my position. I've worked with Eric for years. This sudden change in leadership and contract terms has caught us off guard." "I understand completely," I replied, "and I'm happy to clarify the situation. Eric has fled the country after transferring over $500,000 from our personal accounts while I was unconscious in surgery. He is currently being investigated by the FBI for wire fraud, among other charges. As the majority owner of Reynolds Construction, a fact documented in our corporate records since the company's restructuring 7 years ago, I have full legal authority to negotiate contracts and manage business operations." Harmon's eyebrows rose in surprise. I had no idea the situation was so complex. "It's certainly not what any of us expected," I acknowledged. "But the reality is that the contract revisions I proposed actually protect both our companies. The original terms Eric negotiated included several problematic elements, including the undisclosed second phase of development and the conflicts of interest related to his hidden ownership stake in Westridge through Pinnacle Investment Group." Harmon paled slightly. "You know about that?" "As I mentioned during our meeting, I know about everything. The question now is whether you'd prefer to proceed with a transparent, legally sound contract with Reynolds Construction under my leadership, or whether you'd rather do business with a fugitive who has demonstrated willingness to commit fraud." After a long pause, Harmon nodded. "When you put it that way, the decision is clear. I'll confirm to our board that we're proceeding with the revised contract under your authorization." "Thank you, Mr. Harmon. I understand this situation has created unexpected complications for Westridge as well. I appreciate your professionalism in addressing these issues directly." After the call ended, Caroline's face remained on screen. "That was masterfully handled, Sam. Direct, but not alienating." Harmon seemed convinced. "Let's hope the other clients are equally reasonable," I said, suddenly exhausted. "Eric's clearly not going to fade quietly into the sunset. He's going to fight for control of the company from wherever he's hiding. Which means we need to accelerate our legal proceedings," Caroline agreed. "I'll file the emergency motions first thing tomorrow to formally remove him from all company positions and authorities." After ending the call, I leaned back against my pillows, the pain in my spine suddenly more pronounced. The physicians had warned that stress could exacerbate my physical symptoms, and the emotional roller coaster of telling Lily about her father's betrayal, followed by the high-stakes client negotiation, had depleted my limited reserves. Jennifer appeared with a glass of water and my pain medication. "Heard the end of that call. You were amazing, but you look wiped out." "I feel wiped out," I admitted, accepting the pills gratefully. "How's Lily?" "Still locked in her room, but she took the sandwich I left outside her door. That's something, at least." "Should I try to talk to her again?" Jennifer shook her head. "Give her some space. This is a lot to process. She'll come out when she's ready." As evening fell, the private nurse arrived for my scheduled physical therapy session. Despite the emotional exhaustion, I forced myself to complete the prescribed exercises, each movement a painful reminder of how vulnerable I remained physically, even as I projected strength professionally. "You're pushing too hard," the nurse observed as she helped me back into bed afterward. Recovery from spinal fusion isn't just about physical healing. It requires mental rest, too. "Mental rest is a luxury I can't afford right now," I replied, wincing as she adjusted my position. "Then you risk extending your recovery time significantly. The body and mind are connected, Mrs. Reynolds. Stress produces cortisol, which inhibits healing." I knew she was right, but the alternative seemed worse. Allowing Eric to undermine the company from abroad, leaving Lily without stability or security, surrendering to circumstances rather than fighting back. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by pain and worried thoughts about Lily. Around 2 a.m., I heard her door open, followed by quiet footsteps in the hallway. She appeared in my darkened doorway, a silhouette hesitating at the threshold. "Mom, are you awake?" "Yes, sweetheart, come in." She padded across the room and carefully sat on the edge of the bed. In the dim light, I could see her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale with exhaustion. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice small. "Dad always told me that when things seem impossible, you have to make a plan. Break it down into steps." My heart ached at this echo of Eric's advice, words he clearly hadn't lived by himself. That's good wisdom, even if the source is complicated now. So I made a plan, 3 steps. She held up her fingers in the darkness. First, we get you better. Second, we figure out where we're going to live permanently. Third, we decide what to do about Dad. The mature practicality of her approach caught me by surprise. "That sounds like an excellent plan, Lily." "For step 1, I want to help with your recovery. Aunt Jennifer showed me some of the exercises the physical therapist gave you. I could help remind you to do them, or maybe even help you with some of them." "I'd like that," I said softly. For step 2, I was thinking about our house. Is it really being sold? All my stuff is there, and my friends, and my school. "The situation with the house is complicated," I explained. "Your father put it on the market, but I've filed legal motions to stop the sale. We might be able to keep it, but it depends on several factors, including what happens with the company." She nodded, absorbing this information. "And for step 3, I want to write Dad a letter. Not to send it necessarily, but to tell him how I feel about what he did. My counselor at school says writing letters you don't send can help process feelings." "That sounds like a very healthy approach," I said, impressed by her emotional maturity despite the circumstances. "Mom?" Her voice quavered slightly. "Are we going to be okay? Really okay? Not just saying, 'We're okay,' but actually, everything is horrible okay?" I reached for her hand in the darkness. "Yes, Lily. We're going to be okay. Not immediately, and not without challenges, but yes, we will be okay. The construction company is still solid. My legal background gives me tools to fight back. And, most importantly, we have each other and people who love us." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm still really mad at him, and sad, and confused. I keep trying to understand how he could just leave, like I didn't matter at all." "I know, sweetheart. Those feelings are completely valid, and they're going to be with you for a while. But his actions reflect on him, not on you. You matter, enormously. To me, to Jennifer, to everyone who knows you. Your father's choices don't change your worth." She leaned forward carefully, mindful of my injuries, and rested her head against my shoulder. "I'm glad I still have you, Mom." "You'll always have me," I promised, stroking her hair. "Always." We stayed that way until Lily eventually dozed off, her breathing deepening into sleep. I remained awake, holding my daughter, contemplating the responsibility that now rested solely on my shoulders. Eric's betrayal had transformed me overnight from a supportive wife and mother into the sole provider and protector for our family. The enormity of that task, navigating my physical recovery, securing our financial future, helping Lily process her father's abandonment, and fighting Eric's attempts to undermine me from abroad, felt overwhelming in the quiet darkness. But Lily's simple 3-step plan had wisdom in its straightforward approach. Break the impossible into manageable pieces. Focus on immediate priorities. Move forward one step at a time. Morning brought renewed determination and unexpected support. Caroline arrived with news that the emergency motions had been granted. Eric was officially removed from all positions at Reynolds Construction, his signing authority revoked, his company credit cards canceled. The judge was particularly influenced by the timing of his actions, she explained. Taking funds while you were in emergency surgery struck her as especially egregious. She's expedited the hearings for the other motions as well. Jennifer had coordinated with Lily's school, arranging for assignments to be sent electronically during this transition. The school counselor had reached out, offering specialized support for children experiencing parental abandonment. Most significantly, the management team at Reynolds Construction had rallied behind me. Dave Harmon, the senior project manager, arrived at the apartment with detailed updates on all active projects and a carefully prepared transition plan. "The team wanted me to convey their full support, Mrs. Reynolds," he said, laying out the documents on my makeshift desk. "Everyone's aware of the situation with Eric, and frankly, many of us aren't entirely surprised." "You're not?" I asked, surprised myself. Dave looked uncomfortable. Eric's been acting erratically for months. Secretive meetings, unexplained absences from critical project reviews, unusual financial requests. Several of us had concerns, but he trailed off. "But he was the boss, and he'd built the company," I finished for him. "Exactly. Plus, he had a way of making people question themselves if they raised concerns. He'd suggest they were being paranoid or didn't understand high-level business strategy." The description sounded painfully familiar. The same techniques Eric had used with me when I'd questioned financial decisions or raised concerns about his increasingly secretive behavior. "Well, that era of leadership is over," I said firmly. "I value transparency and believe in collaborative decision-making. I'll need everyone's expertise as we navigate this transition." Dave smiled with evident relief. "That's refreshing to hear. The team's actually excited about the change, despite the difficult circumstances. Eric was not always the most supportive leader." "In what way?" "He took credit for others' ideas, criticized publicly while praising rarely, and created an atmosphere where people were afraid to deliver bad news or raise potential problems." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Eric hadn't just been deceiving me. He'd been creating a company culture that enabled his deception, discouraging questions, punishing transparency, and claiming credit for collective achievements. "That stops now," I declared. "Reynolds Construction will operate differently moving forward. I want to meet with the entire management team as soon as possible, by video conference given my current limitations, to establish new expectations and operating procedures." "The team would welcome that," Dave assured me. "We can set it up for tomorrow morning if that works for you." As Dave was leaving, Lily emerged from her room, looking tentative but more composed than the previous day. "Was that someone from Dad's company?" she asked. "From our company," I corrected gently. And yes, that was Dave Harmon, the senior project manager. He was bringing me updates on current projects. Lily nodded, absorbing this adjustment in perspective. "Are you really going to run the company now? I thought you were a lawyer, not a construction person." "I am a lawyer, which is actually very helpful in running a construction company. There are contracts, regulations, employment issues, all areas where my legal background is valuable. And for the technical construction aspects, We have excellent project managers and engineers. Dad always said you didn't understand his business, Lily observed. He said that's why you stopped working with him on it. I felt a flash of anger at this revelation, another example of how Eric had been shaping a narrative that diminished my capabilities and justified my exclusion from company affairs. Your father and I had different perspectives on many things, I said carefully, but I understand the business better than he realized, and I'm learning more every day. Can I learn about it too? Lily asked unexpectedly. Maybe when you have your video meeting tomorrow, I could just listen. I know it's boring adult stuff, but it's not boring at all, I interrupted, touched by her interest. And yes, you're welcome to sit in on the meeting if you'd like. The company will be part of your future too, one way or another. Later that afternoon, as my physical therapist guided me through increasingly challenging exercises, I found myself contemplating the interwoven paths of physical and professional recovery. Each difficult movement strengthened muscles weakened by surgery. Each business decision rebuilt professional capabilities I'd allowed to atrophy during my years as Eric's supportive wife. Both processes were painful, demanding, and necessary for reclaiming independence. Both required patience and determination. And both were ultimately about regaining the strength that had always been within me, temporarily diminished, but never truly lost. My phone chimed with an email notification from an unfamiliar address. I checked it after finishing therapy, my breath catching when I recognized Eric's writing style despite the new account. Samantha, I've been informed you've taken steps to remove me from my own company. This is both illegal and short-sighted. I built Reynolds Construction from nothing. Every client relationship, every contract, every success stems from my work. You're a lawyer playing at being a construction executive, and you'll run my company into the ground within months. I'm prepared to be reasonable. Transfer control back to me through Greg Turner, and I'll establish a fair maintenance arrangement for you and Lily. Continue on this hostile path, and I'll ensure there's nothing left to control. I have relationships with these clients that go beyond contracts. I have knowledge of project vulnerabilities you can't possibly understand. Don't force me to use these advantages. You have 48 hours to respond with a sensible solution. Eric. The threat was both explicit and calculating. Classic Eric. He was attempting to leverage fear and self-doubt, suggesting I lacked the capability to lead the company while simultaneously offering a seemingly reasonable compromise that would actually surrender everything. 5 years ago, I might have believed him. 2 years ago, I might have wavered. Even 2 weeks ago, fresh from surgery and reeling from betrayal, I might have considered his arguments about my limitations. But now, having seen the company financials, spoken with the management team, and recognized the culture of manipulation Eric had created, I understood his message for what it was: desperation masked as confidence, weakness disguised as strength. I forwarded the email to Caroline with a brief note, more evidence for the judge. Also, let's accelerate the transition announcement to clients and industry partners. Eric's clearly planning a disinformation campaign. Then I turned my attention to preparing for tomorrow's management team meeting, the first step in transforming Reynolds Construction from Eric's personal fiefdom into a company built on transparency, collaboration, and sustainable growth. The company he thought I couldn't possibly understand would become the company I would reimagine and rebuild, not just for financial security, but as a legacy for Lily and a testament to resilience in the face of betrayal. The next morning, I faced the management team of Reynolds Construction for the first time as their official CEO. From my makeshift office setup in the apartment's living room, I surveyed the 12 faces on my screen: project managers, estimators, site superintendents, and administrative leaders who had worked under Eric for years. Some looked curious, others apprehensive, and a few openly relieved. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice," I began. "I know the past 2 weeks have created significant uncertainty for everyone at Reynolds Construction. Today, I want to provide clarity about our path forward and address any concerns you may have." I paused, noting Lily quietly entering the room behind the camera, taking a seat where she could observe without being seen by the team. Her presence both complicated and focused my thoughts, reminding me what was truly at stake in this leadership transition. First, I want to be transparent about the situation with Eric Reynolds. As many of you know, he has left the country after transferring significant funds from our personal accounts. This occurred while I was undergoing emergency spinal surgery, which is why I'm speaking to you today from this temporary setup rather than the office. A few faces registered shock. Apparently, not everyone had heard the full story. What you may not know is that I've been the majority owner of Reynolds Construction since its restructuring 7 years ago. This was primarily a legal arrangement to protect company assets from potential litigation, but it means I have both the legal authority and responsibility to lead the company through this transition. Dave Harmon, the senior project manager, spoke up. "Mrs. Reynolds, I think I speak for many of us when I say we appreciate your candor. There have been a lot of rumors circulating. Can you tell us about your vision for the company moving forward?" "I believe in building on the company's strengths while addressing areas that need improvement," I replied. "Reynolds Construction has an excellent reputation for quality work and creative solutions. That won't change. What will change is how we operate internally." I outlined my immediate priorities: transparent financial management, collaborative decision-making, proper credit for team contributions, and a culture where raising concerns was welcomed rather than punished. With each point, I could see tension visibly easing from shoulders, expressions shifting from wariness to cautious optimism. "One specific change effective immediately," I continued, "is how we structure and document our contracts. I've discovered some irregularities in how certain projects were recorded, including undisclosed secondary phases and conflicts of interest. Going forward, all contracts will be fully transparent, properly documented, and reviewed by our legal team." Linda Chen, the financial controller, unmuted herself. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm relieved to hear this. I've had concerns about some of our financial practices for months, but was told not to worry about the executive-level decisions." "I appreciate your honesty, Linda. That type of dismissal won't happen under my leadership. In fact, I'd like to meet with you separately to review all financial protocols and identify any areas needing immediate attention." As the meeting continued, team members gradually became more engaged, asking questions about specific projects, offering insights into operational challenges, and even suggesting improvements they'd previously been hesitant to mention. I listened, carefully, taking notes and acknowledging the expertise in the room. "I won't pretend to have Eric's years of construction knowledge," I admitted. "What I bring is legal expertise, a commitment to ethical business practices, and a genuine desire to build on the talents of everyone in this company. I'll be depending on all of you as I navigate this learning curve." By the meeting's end, the mood had transformed from apprehension to cautious enthusiasm. We established regular check-ins, prioritized urgent project needs, and assigned action items to address immediate concerns. "Thank you all for your openness and commitment to Reynolds Construction," I concluded. "Together, we'll not only weather this transition but emerge stronger for it." After the call ended, Lily approached my desk, her expression thoughtful. "You're different when you're being a CEO," she observed. "Different how?" "More, I don't know, commanding? Like, when you talk, people really listen to you." "That's part of leadership," I explained. "Projecting confidence even when you're figuring things out as you go." "Were you always like that? Before you married Dad?" The question caught me, off guard with its insight. "Yes, I suppose I was. As an attorney, I had to command respect in negotiations and courtrooms." "Why did you stop? Being like that, I mean." I considered her question carefully, unwilling to burden her with the complex dynamics of adult relationships, yet recognizing her need for honest answers. When your father and I built our lives together, we fell into certain roles that seemed to work for our family. I focused more on supporting his career and raising you, while he took the lead in business matters. It happened gradually, not as a conscious decision. Lily processed this, her young face serious. Did Dad make you stop being strong? No, sweetheart. It wasn't that simple. I made choices. We both did, about how our marriage would work. But sometimes when you step back from using certain skills, they become dormant. Not gone, just waiting to be reactivated when needed. Like now, she said. Like now, I agreed. Her next question cut straight to the heart. Mom, if you had stayed strong, being a lawyer and everything, do you think Dad would have left? The innocent brutality of children's questions never failed to astonish me. Lily, your father's choices reflect his character, not mine. Whether I was practicing law or supporting the family from home wouldn't have changed his fundamental values. People who are willing to abandon their families during a medical crisis have issues that go beyond their partner's career choices. She nodded slowly. I'm glad you're strong again. We need that now. The simple validation in her words nearly brought me to tears. Thank you, sweetheart. And I'm sorry this situation has forced you to think about such difficult things. It's okay. I'd rather know the truth even when it's hard. She straightened her shoulders in an unconscious mirroring of my posture during the meeting. So what happens next with the company? We secure the ongoing projects, rebuild client relationships that Eric may have damaged, and establish new operating procedures. And personally, I continue healing so I can eventually get back to the office physically. Can I help? Maybe I could learn some of the business stuff. I'm good at math, and I know a lot about construction from listening to Dad all these years. The offer touched me deeply, my daughter seeking ways to contribute during crisis rather than simply being sheltered from it. I would welcome your help, I told her sincerely. We could start with some basics about how construction projects are structured and budgeted. You might also have insights about your father's methods that could be valuable. Her face brightened. Slightly, the first real animation I'd seen since she'd learned of Eric's betrayal. I used to go to sites with him sometimes. He explained how to read blueprints and why certain materials were better than others. I remember most of it. That knowledge could be extremely useful as I'm getting up to speed, I told her. Would you be willing to join some of my meetings with the project managers when they discuss technical details? Really? You'd let me do that? Absolutely. This company will be part of your future too, one way or another. Starting to understand it now makes perfect sense. For the first time in days, Lily's smile reached her eyes. I'd like that. That afternoon, Caroline arrived with updates on the legal proceedings. The judge has approved all emergency motions. Eric has been officially removed from any position of authority at Reynolds Construction, and attempts to access company funds or systems will now be treated as criminal acts. What about recovering the personal funds he transferred? More complicated, but we're making progress. The accounts in Belize and Panama have been frozen pending investigation. The Cayman Islands situation is challenging. Their banking secrecy laws are designed specifically to prevent exactly what we're trying to do. And Eric himself? Any leads on his location? Caroline shook her head. The FBI believes he's in a country without extradition agreements with the U.S. They've tracked communications through various routers and VPNs, but he's being careful. The good news is that financial restrictions are tightening globally. His movements will be increasingly constrained. So he has the money but limited ability to use it, I summarized. Exactly. And with his reputation now publicly damaged, he'll find it difficult to establish new business ventures or leverage his industry connections. I considered this information, seeking the larger strategic picture. He's essentially trapped himself, stolen, funds he can't fully access, In countries where he has no established identity or connections, unable to return to the U.S. without facing immediate arrest. That's a concise summary of his predicament, Caroline agreed. Though I wouldn't underestimate his capacity for causing trouble remotely. He's already attempted to undermine your leadership with clients. Which is why we need to accelerate the formal leadership transition announcement, I decided. Draft a press release for immediate distribution to industry publications, key clients, and partners. We need to establish my leadership as legitimate and decisive before Eric can spread further disinformation. Caroline made notes on her tablet. I'll have a draft to you by this evening. We should also prepare for media inquiries. This story has elements that will interest business journalists. Female executive takes control after husband's fraudulent activities. Comeback story after personal and professional setbacks. I'm not interested in becoming a media sensation, I said firmly. This is about stabilizing the company and securing our future, not creating headlines. Understanding but managing the narrative is still important. If you don't tell your story, Eric or others will tell it for you, likely in ways that serve their interests rather than yours. She had a point. Eric had spent years shaping perceptions of both of us, portraying himself as the visionary builder, and me as the supportive wife with limited business acumen. Countering that established narrative would require deliberate communication. Fine. But let's keep it focused on the company's stability and future, not the personal drama. I'll do one carefully selected interview with a respected business publication to set the record straight, then redirect all attention to Reynolds Construction's projects and innovations. The next morning brought the first test of this communication strategy. The press release announcing my assumption of leadership at Reynolds Construction had generated immediate interest, including a lengthy email from Eric that Caroline's IT security team intercepted before it reached clients. Eric's message had been particularly vicious, questioning my mental stability, claiming I was vindictively seizing his company, and suggesting my medical condition rendered me incapable of effective leadership. He'd attached altered medical records supposedly showing cognitive impairment from my medication regimen. This crosses several legal boundaries, Caroline noted as we reviewed the intercepted email. Forgery of medical documents, defamation, interference with business relationships. We're adding these to the criminal complaints. What worries me more is that some of his claims might sound plausible to people who don't know the full situation, I admitted. The idea of a heavily medicated patient making major business decisions could raise legitimate concerns. Which is exactly why we need to be proactive in shaping the narrative, Caroline insisted. The fact that you've already successfully renegotiated 3 major contracts and held a productive management team meeting completely contradicts his portrayal. After careful consideration, I agreed to an interview with Construction Industry Today, a respected trade publication whose readers included most of our clients and industry partners. The journalist, Miriam Santos, arrived at the apartment that afternoon, clearly curious about both the business situation and my physical condition. "Thank you for making time, Mrs. Reynolds," she began, setting up her recorder. "I understand you're recovering from major surgery while simultaneously taking control of a multi-million-dollar construction firm. That's quite a challenging combination." "It is," I acknowledged, "but challenges often reveal capabilities we didn't know we possessed. Reynolds Construction has an exceptional team that has made this transition smoother than it might otherwise have been." Throughout the interview, I steered the conversation away from Eric's betrayal and toward the company's future, our commitment to existing projects, innovations in sustainable building practices, and plans for more transparent client relationships. Some might question whether someone with your legal background rather than construction experience is equipped to lead a company like Reynolds, Santos noted. "That's a reasonable question," I conceded. "What I bring to Reynolds Construction is expertise in contract negotiation, risk management, and corporate governance, all critical aspects of the construction industry. For technical construction knowledge, I rely on our exceptional project managers and engineers, many of whom have been with the company for years. And your health? Managing a company while recovering from spinal surgery can't be easy. It presents logistical challenges, certainly. But modern technology allows for effective leadership even with temporary physical limitations. My doctors expect a strong recovery, and in the meantime, I'm fully capable of making sound business decisions. The interview continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from specific projects to industry trends. Throughout, I maintained a balance of candor about the situation and confidence about the future. When Santos finally turned off her recorder, she had one last off-the-record question. Between us, how are you really holding up? This has to be an incredibly difficult personal situation on top of serious medical challenges. I considered deflecting, but opted for measured honesty. It's been the most challenging period of my life, particularly explaining to my daughter that her father chose to abandon us both. But difficult circumstances often clarify what truly matters. Right. Now, that's healing physically, supporting my daughter emotionally, and ensuring the company that will secure our future remains strong. Santos nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, based on our conversation today, I'd say Reynolds Construction is in very capable hands. After she left, Jennifer arrived with dinner and news that she'd collected more of our belongings from the house. The real estate agent Eric hired was there, showing the property to potential buyers. I explained that the sale was being legally contested, but she insisted Eric had assured her it was proceeding. Another attempt to create facts on the ground before legal processes can catch up, I observed. We'll need to send formal cease and desist notices to all real estate agencies in the area. As we ate dinner, the three of us gathered around the small table in the apartment's dining area. I noticed Lily watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked. I was just thinking about something that journalist lady asked, about you running the company even though you're a lawyer, not a construction person. What about it? Dad always made it sound like the business stuff was super complicated and that's why you didn't get involved. But today, when you were explaining the Westridge contract to me, it didn't seem that complicated. It was just budgets and timelines and materials lists. The insightful observation struck me forcefully. Eric had indeed cultivated an air of mystique around the business operations, suggesting they were too complex for my legal mind to fully grasp. It was a subtle but effective way of maintaining exclusive control while seemingly respecting my intelligence in other areas. "Your father is an intelligent man," I replied carefully. "But part of maintaining power sometimes involves making things seem more complex than they are. The fundamentals of most businesses, including construction, aren't mysterious once you break them down to their essential elements." "So he was kind of lying to you all along?" Lily pressed. "I'd say he was creating a narrative that served his purposes," I clarified. "It's something we all do to some extent. Frame situations in ways that support our preferred outcomes. The problem comes when those narratives diverge significantly from reality, or when they're used to manipulate others." Lily digested this, twirling pasta around her fork thoughtfully. "Mom, I've been thinking about what I want to do after high school. I always thought I'd go into architecture because Dad said I had a good eye for design. But now I'm thinking, maybe I should study business or law like you did." "You have plenty of time to figure that out," I assured her. "And whatever you choose should be based on your interests and talents, not reactions to what's happening now." "I know. But seeing you run the company, being strong even though you're hurt and sad, it makes me think maybe that's something I could do too someday." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Through all the betrayal and loss, my daughter was finding a new model of strength to aspire to, one that had been largely hidden during our years as a traditional family with Eric at the helm. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Lily, and whatever you choose, I'll support you completely." That night, as I worked through emails from project managers and reviewed contract details from my bed, I found myself reflecting on the strange paradox of my situation. Eric's betrayal had simultaneously taken so much: our savings, our sense of security, our family structure, and yet had returned something I hadn't fully realized was missing: my professional identity and confidence. The corporate attorney who had gradually disappeared into the role of supportive wife had re-emerged with unexpected strength. Skills I'd set aside were proving not just useful, but crucial for navigating this crisis. The woman Eric had dismissed as not understanding his business was now reimagining and restructuring that very business with growing confidence. My phone chimed with an unexpected notification, a message from Robert Harmon at Westridge Development. "Mrs. Reynolds, I wanted to let you know that Eric contacted me directly again today with an offer to continue our project unofficially through a new entity he's establishing overseas. I declined and informed him that Westridge is fully committed to our contract with Reynolds Construction under your leadership. I thought you should be aware of this approach." I thanked him for the information and his loyalty, then forwarded the message to Caroline and the FBI contact handling Eric's case. This new attempt to undermine the company was both concerning and revealing. Eric was growing desperate as his options narrowed. The following week brought accelerating progress on multiple fronts. My physical therapy was showing results. I could now stand and walk short distances with a walker, giving me greater independence despite the ongoing pain. The first deposit from the renegotiated Westridge contract arrived, stabilizing the company's cash flow. The management team was functioning cohesively under my leadership, with several key personnel expressing relief at the more transparent communication style. Most significantly, we received news that authorities had located and frozen an additional account Eric had established in Singapore containing approximately $220,000 of the transferred funds. It wasn't the full amount he'd taken, but it represented meaningful progress in recovering our stolen assets. 6 weeks after my surgery, I was finally ready to visit the Reynolds Construction offices in person. The medical team had cleared me for part-time work outside the home, provided I maintained my physical therapy regimen and used appropriate supports for my still-healing spine. Jennifer drove while Lily sat beside me in the back seat, both of them watchful for any signs of discomfort as we navigated the familiar route to the industrial park where the company headquarters stood. I was nervous in a way that surprised me. This building had been part of my life for years, but always as Eric's domain, a place where I was merely an occasional visitor, the boss's wife dropping by with lunch or attending the rare company function. Now I was arriving as CEO, the actual leader of the organization that occupied this space. The psychological shift was perhaps even more significant than the physical challenge of managing the visit with my still recovering body. "You okay?" Lily asked, noticing my silence as we pulled into the parking lot. "Just thinking about how different this feels," I admitted. "Good different or bad different?" I considered her question as I looked at the Reynolds Construction sign above the entrance, the company name Eric had chosen to reflect his identity, never imagining it would one day more accurately reflect mine. Challenging different, I decided. But good, I think. Dave Harmon was waiting at the entrance with a wheelchair, a practical accommodation I'd initially resisted, but eventually accepted as necessary for this first visit. "Welcome to headquarters, Mrs. Reynolds," he said warmly. "The team's excited to finally meet with you in person." As Dave wheeled me through the reception area, heads turned and conversations paused. I recognized most faces from video meetings, but understood that for many employees, this was their first real interaction with the woman who had suddenly replaced the founder as their leader. "I'd like to address everyone briefly, if that's possible," I requested. "Of course. We can gather in the main conference room. It's the most accessible space." Within minutes, the large conference room was filled with employees from all departments: administrative staff, estimators, project coordinators. accounting personnel. Lily stood quietly beside Jennifer at the back of the room, observing everything with keen interest. "Thank you all for adjusting your schedules for this impromptu gathering," I began. I wanted my first visit to the office to include a chance to speak with everyone directly. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. The past 2 months have brought unprecedented challenges to Reynolds Construction. The sudden leadership change, the legal complications, the questions from clients and partners, all of these created understandable uncertainty. Nods of agreement rippled through the audience. What impresses me most is how this team has responded to that uncertainty, not with panic or paralysis, but with professionalism and commitment to our projects and clients. You've demonstrated exactly the qualities that make Reynolds Construction worth fighting for. I continued with specific acknowledgments of departments that had managed particular challenges, updated everyone on my recovery progress, and outlined priorities for the coming quarter. Throughout, I emphasized transparency, collaborative problem-solving, and the importance of ethical business practices. Reynolds Construction isn't defined by any single person, not its founder and not me. It's defined by the collective expertise and integrity represented in this room. My role is to provide direction and remove obstacles, but the company's success depends on all of you. As the formal meeting concluded and I began speaking with smaller groups, I noticed Lily engaged in animated conversation with Linda Chen from the finance department. My daughter was asking detailed questions about project budgeting, clearly building on what she'd learned from our discussions at home. Dave wheeled me over to join them. Lily's been asking some impressively sophisticated questions about our cost tracking systems, Linda commented. She seems to have a natural aptitude for financial analysis. Mom's been teaching me about how construction projects make money, Lily explained. I'm trying to understand how Dad could have hidden things in the company numbers when so many people were looking at them. Linda's expression grew serious. That's actually an excellent question with an uncomfortable answer. Many of us saw concerning patterns but were discouraged from asking too many questions. Your father had a forceful management style that didn't welcome scrutiny. You mean he yelled at people who asked questions? Lily translated bluntly. Linda smiled slightly. That's one way to put it. He was particularly dismissive of financial concerns raised by female employees, suggesting we were being unnecessarily cautious or didn't understand the big picture. That sounds familiar, I noted, thinking of similar phrases Eric had used when I questioned household or personal financial decisions. The company culture is already changing, Linda continued. Just knowing that raising concerns won't result in public humiliation or potential job loss has made an enormous difference. By the end of the 2-hour visit, I was physically exhausted but professionally energized. The team's response to my leadership had been overwhelmingly positive, with multiple employees taking me aside to express relief at the new direction and communication style. As Jennifer and Lily helped me back into the car, Dave approached with a final update. I wanted to let you know, we've just received confirmation that we're shortlisted for the Mountain View Municipal Complex project. It would be our largest public sector contract to date. That's wonderful news, I responded. I thought that proposal went out before the leadership transition. It did. Eric spearheaded it, Dave acknowledged. But the evaluation committee specifically mentioned their positive impression of the company's new leadership and ethical standards in their feedback. Your interview with Construction Industry Today apparently made quite an impression on the committee chair. The irony was inescapable. A major opportunity that Eric had initiated would now potentially come to fruition under my leadership, partly because of the values and approach I was bringing to the company he had built. 2 days later, as I continued, processing the insights from my office visit and planning longer-term strategy for Reynolds Construction, Jennifer arrived with unexpected news. The FBI called. They've located Eric. My pulse quickened. Where? Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Apparently, he made a mistake, used a credit card tied to one of his hidden accounts at a luxury resort. Mexican authorities are cooperating with the investigation, but they don't have an extradition treaty covering financial crimes. So they know where he is, but can't bring him back to face charges? Not exactly. They can't extradite him for the wire fraud and financial crimes, but they discovered he's been traveling on a falsified passport. That's an immigration violation that does qualify for extradition. The implications settled around me. Eric might soon be returned to the United States, not for his greatest crimes against us, but for a technical violation in how he'd executed his escape. "Have you told Lily?" I asked. Jennifer shook her head. "I thought you should decide how and when to share this with her." That evening, after Lily had completed her homework, I called her into the living room. She'd grown noticeably in just these 2 months, not physically, but in maturity and presence. The traumatic disruption had accelerated her emotional development in ways that were both impressive and slightly heartbreaking. "The FBI has located your father," I told her directly, believing she deserved straightforward information. "He's in Mexico, and there's a possibility he'll be brought back to the United States to face charges." Her expression remained carefully neutral. "What happens if he comes back? Will he go to jail?" "Most likely, yes. The evidence against him is substantial, and the crimes are serious." She nodded slowly, processing this information. "Would I be allowed to see him? If he's in jail, I mean." The question caught me off guard. Despite everything Eric had done, despite his complete abandonment without so much as a goodbye message to his daughter, Lily still sought some connection with her father. "That would be your choice, sweetheart. If he returns and you want to see him, I won't stand in the way of that." "I don't know if I want to," she admitted, "but I think I need to. I have questions only he can answer." "That's understandable. Just remember that his answers might not be what you're hoping to hear." "I know, but they'd be real answers, not just me imagining what he might say." Her wisdom continued to amaze me. The clear-eyed recognition that even painful truth was preferable to comforting uncertainty. 3 months after Eric's betrayal and my surgery, life had established new patterns that would have been unimaginable in our previous existence. I was working from home 3 days a week and going into the office 2 days, gradually increasing my physical capacity while leading Reynolds Construction through its transformation. Lily was thriving academically despite the emotional challenges, and had begun accompanying me to the office occasionally, learning aspects of the business from various department heads who had taken her under their wing. We had moved back into our house after legal proceedings had stopped the unauthorized sale, though Lily and I both found ourselves redesigning spaces that held too many memories of Eric. The master bedroom became my home office, while I took one of the guest rooms as my new bedroom. Lily repainted her room in colors her father had previously vetoed, a small act of independence that seemed to bring her satisfaction. Most significantly, my perspective on Eric's betrayal had evolved from overwhelming personal injury to something more complex and ultimately empowering. The man who had abandoned us had also, inadvertently, created conditions that forced me to reclaim professional and personal capabilities I had gradually surrendered during our marriage. The company he had built as a monument to his ego was now being transformed into something more ethical, collaborative, and sustainable under my leadership. The daughter he had abandoned was developing resilience, critical thinking, and a nuanced understanding of human complexity that would serve her throughout life. None of this justified or excused what Eric had done. The betrayal remained profound, the abandonment of his child unforgivable, the theft significant. But the narrative was no longer simply one of victimization. It had become a story of reclamation and transformation. One evening, as Lily and I reviewed plans for the Mountain View Municipal Complex project that Reynolds Construction had indeed won, my phone rang with Caroline's number. "They're bringing him back," she said without preamble. "Mexican authorities are extraditing Eric tomorrow morning." He'll be arraigned in federal court the following day on multiple charges, including wire fraud, identity theft, and passport fraud. After I hung up, Lily looked at me questioningly. Dad's coming back, isn't he? Yes, he'll be in custody and facing serious charges. She nodded, returning to the project plans with a composure that belied her 13 years. I think I am going to see him. Not right away, but when I'm ready. I want him to know that even though he left us, we're doing fine without him. Better, actually, in some ways. Better, I echoed, curious about her assessment. You're stronger now. Happier. In a different way. Not like regular happy, but like purposeful happy. And I'm learning things I never would have if we'd stayed the way we were. So yeah, better. I considered her words, acknowledging their essential truth. The pain and betrayal remained real, but so did the growth and discovery that had emerged from those difficult circumstances. You're right, I told her. Not about everything. There are losses that nothing can fully compensate for. But there is something powerful in rebuilding on your own terms, in discovering strength you didn't know you possessed. Lily smiled slightly, turning back to the architectural drawings spread across the table. I think I want to be an engineer, she announced. Not just because of the construction company, but because I like how things fit together and support each other. How you can build something strong even after everything falls apart. Her words captured perfectly what we had been doing these past months. Not just surviving betrayal, but engineering a new foundation built on transparency, strength, and mutual support. The structure of our lives had indeed collapsed, but from those ruins, we were creating something different and, in many ways, more authentic than what had existed before. The construction company that Eric thought I couldn't possibly understand had become the cornerstone of our reconstruction. The legal skills he had dismissed as irrelevant to real business had provided the framework for our recovery. And the daughter he had abandoned was emerging as a thoughtful young woman with insights that continually surprised and impressed me. When he emptied our accounts during my surgery, Eric had believed he was ensuring his future while destroying mine. He couldn't have been more wrong. In his arrogance, he had forgotten the most important detail, that I had always been more capable than he had allowed himself to recognize, and that capabilities, once awakened, could not be easily suppressed again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.